All right, folks, we're doing another dramatic blog reading, going back, in this case, to the very first day of the year, January 1st, 2024. The irony of epistemology. The irony of epistemology is that it recommends against itself. Epistemology captivates anyone who feels lied to, such as edgelord teenage atheists everywhere. For it promises a quote-unquote science, or ology, of getting the truth on your own. Or at least, that's the vibe of historical intro texts like Descartes. Root around the liars and evil geniuses and take a Gnostic path. It also implicitly promises a language in which to justify belief to others, so as not to become the liar oneself. After all, the classical definition of knowledge is justified true belief. Justified to who? To yourself? Well, maybe. But people slide very naturally into the idea that you owe the justification to someone else. But the truth is, I don't owe any of you a justification, not because of some gross idea that no one owes anyone anything, but because I owe you all the opposite. Let me explain. While crisp classical definitions like the above suffer a death of a million edgelord edge cases, more robust are relative statements like, the same belief with more convergent lines of evidence is more justified. Converging lines of evidence. Basic epistemological principle. And yet this immediately pushes the gold standard for knowledge out of the hyperverbal realm, typical of typical philosophical ambition, because linguistic thought, which excels at being serial, offers the least convergence, when nonverbal intuitions can converge from seeming infinite dimensions, combining information from all stages of life and sensory modalities. This is why some ideas seem to come out of nowhere. They are out of linear linguistic sequence. Next principle, the most convergent lines of evidence are least verbalizable. We can see this in modern neural network models where the number of neurons serving as input to even one neuron far outstrips the complexity of any linguistic justification for a belief ever offered in a social setting, such as in a published argument aiming to establish philosophical knowledge in print for the community. This gives rise to a sort of paradox. The more justified your belief, the less you can justify it to others. I put this in a far less paradoxical form years ago in what I was told was the quote-unquote epistemic argument for anarchism. Long before I did some research and identified as one, I was like, news to me, I made the epistemic argument for anarchism. I mean, I still need to figure out, I've not been able to find where this argument has been made before, though. I did go looking. Someone told me vaguely that it had been. Anyway, I believe the epistemic argument for anarchism. Premise number 1. The more information we can base our decisions on, the better our decisions can be. Okay. Premise number 2. The more we decentralize our decision-making, the less we must centralize information in order to base our decisions on it. Okay, premise 3, the less we must centralize information in order to base our decisions on it, the more information in human consciousness we can base our decisions on. Because we don't have to put it in words and put it in a central linguistic format. We can use the thoughts in our heads, of which there are many that never escape into wordland. Okay, so 4, therefore, the more we decentralize our decision-making, the better our decisions can be. Freedom is actually an epistemic virtue, not just a moral, political virtue, whatever that would mean. So when I say I owe you the opposite, and without loss of generality, as they say in math, imply that you owe others the opposite as well, I mean that we owe each other good decision-making, which means we owe each other listening and research, not reductive explanation and justification. Listening to our own gut and everything else, I listen to everyone. I explain little. Please listen. Listen diversely. Listen to what offends you. Listen to people who are evil and people you think have done wrong. Listen to the opposition and listen to your friends. Listen at least as much as you refuse to explain yourself to anyone. And listen at least as much as you refuse to justify in words what you learn by listening. This is a healthy diet for its, as they say in computer science, garbage in, garbage out, otherwise. And unless we learn far more than we speak, we generate bullshit on the daily. The right to remain silent is an epistemic principle. May all silence become meaningless. And yet, the moral neutrality of inaction is a social fiction, much like the indulgences of the medieval church. More on that in tomorrow's article, The Immorality of Inaction, which I did put out the day after, and which I just did a dramatic reading of a second ago. So click backwards on YouTube or wherever you're viewing this.